It was a quiet, rainy evening in a small city, the kind where the streets glisten with raindrops, and the soft hum of distant car engines echoes through the air. People huddled under umbrellas, rushing to their destinations, their footsteps drowned by the rhythmic patter of rain. Amara had just finished her shift at the local tailor's shop, her hands tired and her heart heavy. She was barely making ends meet, living in a small, cramped apartment that always seemed to smell of old fabric and dust. But she never let her struggle show. Her smile, though worn, still reached her eyes, and her gentle spirit made her a familiar figure in the neighborhood. That evening, as Amara made her way home, clutching her umbrella tightly against the wind, she noticed him. The man was elderly, hunched over with a grocery bag in his hands, his frail body shivering from the cold. He was struggling to keep his balance, his umbrella blown inside out by the gusts of wind. The sight was heart-wrenching. Amara knew she should keep walking. She had little time, and even less energy. But something about the man's helplessness tugged at her heart. She couldn't just leave him there, drenched and vulnerable. She hesitated for a moment, her feet frozen to the sidewalk. She glanced at her own meager earnings in her pocket, reminding herself that there wasn't much left to spare. But before she could second-guess herself, her feet moved on their own. She stepped forward, her umbrella stretching toward the old man. "Here, let me help you," she offered, her voice soft yet determined. The man looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. "Thank you, young lady," he muttered, his voice thick with exhaustion. Amara smiled and helped him gather his things, guiding him carefully down the slippery sidewalk. Little did she know, this small act of kindness, one that she didn't think twice about, would be the start of a journey that would change her life forever. As Amara escorted the elderly man through the rain, the world around them seemed to fade away, leaving only the sound of their footsteps and the soft rustling of the wind. It wasn't just the rain that made the evening feel heavy. It was the weight of unspoken stories, of struggles that could only be understood through silence. "Where are you headed?" Amara asked, trying to make small talk as they walked. She was always one to avoid awkward silences, preferring to fill them with light conversation. The man paused for a moment, glancing at her with a faint, tired smile. "Just a few blocks away," he said, his voice shaky. "I live alone. Don't get out much these days." Amara's heart sank. She had known too many people who had become isolated with age. It was a quiet kind of loneliness that could eat away at a person's soul, like a slow burn. She couldn't help but feel for him. "Are you okay, sir?" she asked, noticing how slow his steps had become, like he was struggling to catch his breath. He didn't immediately respond. Instead, he stared down at the ground, as if lost in thought. Amara stayed quiet, not wanting to push him, but her concern only grew. Something in his posture, his defeated slump, spoke volumes. After a long pause, the man sighed. "It's not easy, you know. Losing everything. People think I'm fine, but—" He trailed off, his words caught in his throat. Amara stopped in her tracks, her gaze fixed on him. "I'm sorry. What do you mean?" she asked gently, her voice filled with genuine curiosity. The old man seemed to debate whether he should share his pain, but something in Amara's sincere expression made him open up. "I used to be somebody. I had a family, a job I loved, a home. But that was years ago. My wife, she passed away. And my children, well, they moved on with their lives. I guess I became invisible." There it was, his story raw and unfiltered. Amara could feel the weight of his words pressing down on her chest. Her fingers tightened around her umbrella as she instinctively offered him a steadying hand, a small but meaningful gesture of reassurance. "I'm so sorry," she murmured, her heart aching for him. "That sounds incredibly hard." The old man gave a wistful smile, his eyes glistening with a mixture of sadness and nostalgia. "I never expected things to turn out this way," he continued, voice trembling. "But here I am, struggling to get by with nothing but memories and this silly grocery bag. I guess I'm not as strong as I used to be." Amara's thoughts swirled in her mind. Her own struggles seemed trivial compared to his. She had always been a fighter, even if her fight wasn't as dramatic as his. But she understood loss. She understood the quiet ache of feeling abandoned, overlooked. She paused, staring down at his grocery bag, noticing that it seemed unusually light, like it contained nothing but empty hopes. Her eyes lingered on his trembling hands, and in that moment, Amara made a decision. "You shouldn't have to go through this alone," she said, her voice firm despite the lump in her throat. "I'll help you. You don't have to carry that burden by yourself anymore." The man blinked at her, surprise flashing across his face. His tired, faded eyes searched her expression for any sign of insincerity, but all he found was unwavering compassion. "You don't have to do that," he murmured, shaking his head. But Amara shook hers firmly. "I want to," she replied. And she did. She wanted to make sure he didn't feel as invisible as he believed himself to be. She wanted to show him that there was still kindness left in the world, even if it came from a stranger. Together, they continued their walk through the rain, with Amara carrying the man's grocery bag and guiding him safely along the sidewalk. Her heart felt lighter than it had all week. It was the right thing to do. However, as they approached the man's small, dilapidated apartment building, Amara felt a flutter of unease settle in her stomach. She had already given him her umbrella, and now she was about to give him something even more valuable, her time, her energy, her care. Would he think she was being too forward? Would he feel guilty, even though she didn't expect anything in return? Before she could ask herself more questions, they arrived at his doorstep. The old man turned to her, his face softened by gratitude, though the lines of age and loss still marked him. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. The lid creaked open slowly, revealing a small, worn envelope tucked inside. It wasn't like the usual letter she had seen. It was aged, as though it had been sitting there for decades. The writing on the envelope was familiar, though. It looked almost identical to the handwriting on the note the old man had given her the night before. Her heart raced as she pulled the envelope out and opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper, covered in hurried writing. Her eyes scanned the page quickly, her mind struggling to comprehend what it all meant. "I didn't want to leave you with nothing, but I fear I cannot escape the past. There are people looking for this, and they won't stop until they get it. Be careful and trust no one." Her pulse quickened. What was this? Who was the old man really? And why had he warned her? A sudden realization struck her like a bolt of lightning. This wasn't just about him. It was about her now, too. Somehow, by helping him, she had become entangled in something dark, something dangerous. Before she could fully process her thoughts, she heard a faint sound, footsteps from the hallway. She quickly shoved the envelope back into the box, closing it with trembling hands. Turning to the door, She braced herself, heart pounding. There was a chance that whoever had followed her here could be just as dangerous as the man had warned her about. The footsteps grew louder. Whoever it was wasn't far behind. Amara's eyes flicked around the room, searching for an escape route. Her heart thudded in her chest, the world outside the apartment door suddenly feeling too close, too suffocating. The room felt smaller, the shadows darker. And then, without warning, the door swung open. Her breath caught in her throat. Amara's heart raced as the door swung open, the sound of it creaking on its hinges sending a chill down her spine. She froze, every muscle in her body tense, with a mixture of fear and anticipation. For a split second, the world seemed to hang in the balance. Time slowed, and the air grew thick, heavy with the weight of what was about to unfold. Standing in the doorway was not some stranger, not an intruder or someone dangerous, as she had feared. It was the old man. But there was something different about him now, something far more unsettling. His appearance was unchanged, still frail, still hunched with age, but there was a hardness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. His face, once kind and grateful, was now clouded with an expression that seemed almost calculating. He glanced past her, his gaze flickering to the wooden box on the table. "You shouldn't have opened it," he said, his voice cold and firm, lacking the warmth she had heard the night before. Amara's breath caught in her throat. "What's going on?" she demanded, her voice barely a whisper, as if afraid the walls themselves might be listening. "Who are you? Why did you give me the note? Why did you leave me that message?" The old man stepped into the room slowly, his movements deliberate. He closed the door behind him with a soft click, his eyes never leaving hers. "I never wanted you involved in this," he said, his voice quieter now, tinged with a sense of regret. "But it's too late now. You've seen too much. You've read too many of the wrong things." Amara felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean? What's in that box? Why did you give me the note?" The man sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly, as if the weight of years of secrets was finally bearing down on him. He looked at her with an expression that bordered on sympathy, mixed with the burden of a man who had carried a dangerous truth for far too long. "You thought I was just a lonely old man," he said, his voice thick with the shadows of the past. "But I'm more than that. I've been running from my past for years, hiding from people who would do anything to get their hands on what I possess." Amara's head spun. She felt as though she were standing in the middle of a puzzle, trying to fit together pieces that didn't quite belong. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What's in that box? What do you have that someone would want so badly?" The old man stepped closer, his frail hands reaching for the wooden box. With trembling fingers, he opened it and withdrew a small, ornate key. It wasn't like any key Amara had ever seen. It was old, but the craftsmanship was exquisite. Delicate engravings covered its surface, and a strange symbol marked the handle. "This key," he said, holding it up, "is the key to everything. To a treasure, to a secret that's been hidden for centuries." Amara's mind raced as she processed the words. A treasure? A secret? None of this made sense. "You're saying this key is important? That people are after it?" The old man nodded, his eyes dark with the weight of his admission. "I was once part of something much bigger than you can imagine. A group that protected the key to an ancient vault, a vault that holds something so powerful that it could change the course of history." Amara took a step back, her heart thudding in her chest. The weight of his words settled on her like a crushing burden. The rain outside had started up again, but the storm brewing inside the apartment felt far more dangerous. "You've been running from them, haven't you?" she whispered, the pieces of the puzzle beginning to fall into place. "That's why you're alone. You've been hiding from the people who want this key." The man nodded grimly. "Yes. I thought I could escape it. I thought I could leave it all behind when I came here. But they found me. They always do." Amara's mind raced. "And now you think they're coming for me?" she asked, a knot forming in her stomach. The old man's gaze darkened. "It's already started. You've seen the key, you've read the note. You're involved whether you like it or not. And they won't stop until they get it back." The sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway once again, this time unmistakable, slow, deliberate. The old man's eyes flickered to the door, his face pale. "They're here," he said, his voice dropping to a fearful whisper. "You need to leave. Now." Amara's heart skipped a beat. There was no time for questions, no time to think. She could feel the danger closing in, thickening the air around her. With a burst of adrenaline, she grabbed the key from his hand, slipping it into her pocket. "Where do I go?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Don't trust anyone," the old man warned, his eyes wide with urgency. "They'll be watching. Just run." Before she could respond, the door behind them suddenly burst open. Two men in dark suits stepped into the room, their faces expressionless, cold. They were tall, imposing, and moved with a predatory precision. Amara's blood ran cold. The old man stood in front of her, his frail body an unexpected shield. "Leave her alone," he shouted, though his voice trembled with age. One of the men stepped forward, unfazed by the old man's protest. "We don't have time for games," he said flatly, his gaze fixed on Amara. "Give us the key." The other man's eyes narrowed, scanning Amara's face as though searching for any sign of hesitation. The room felt like it was closing in on her. Amara's mind raced. She had the key now, the key to a secret that was far more dangerous than she ever could have imagined. The old man's warning had been clear, but she never expected the danger to reach her so quickly. Her hand brushed the pocket where the key was hidden. Could she trust the old man? Could she trust anyone in this web of lies and secrets? Her instincts told her to run, to escape the danger before it was too late. With a sudden burst of courage, she pushed past the men, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know where to go or what to do, but she knew one thing for sure. She was no longer just a bystander in this dangerous game. She was a player now, and the stakes were higher than she could ever have imagined. Amara's pulse pounded in her ears as she bolted for the door, her breath coming in short, panic bursts. The men's cold voices followed her, their footsteps echoing in the narrow hallway behind her. She didn't dare look back. She could hear them gaining on her, their boots pounding the wooden floor with heavy, deliberate steps. Her mind raced, her thoughts tumbling over each other like a waterfall. What now? She had the key. She had no idea what it unlocked, but it was clear the men would stop at nothing to get it back. She needed to get away. She needed to think. Without hesitation, Amara turned the corner and sprinted down the staircase, her wet shoes slipping against the old wood. The chill of the evening air hit her as she pushed open the exit door and stepped into the street. She didn't stop running, not until the lights of the building were far behind her and the night swallowed her whole. She ducked into an alley, pressing her back against the damp brick wall, trying to calm her breathing. The rain had begun to fall harder, as though nature itself was warning her that there was no escape from the storm that had just begun. Her heart hammered in her chest, and her fingers instinctively clutched the key in her pocket, its cold surface a reminder of the dangerous path she had unwittingly walked into. For a moment, Amara simply stood there, the weight of her situation sinking in. She wasn't just caught in a mystery anymore. She was in the middle of something far bigger, something that could cost her everything. She wasn't a helpless bystander anymore. She was a target. And those men weren't the only ones after the key. Suddenly, a voice broke through the chaos of her thoughts. It was a soft, almost musical tone, familiar yet distant. Amara? She whirled around, heart racing again. Standing in the shadows of the alley was the last person she expected to see, the elderly man. His frail figure was barely visible in the darkness, but his presence was undeniable. He had followed her. Are you okay?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper, his expression a mix of concern and fear. Amara's mind was a whirl of confusion. She hadn't expected him to follow her. After everything that had happened, she didn't know if she could trust him anymore. Yet, in the midst of all the chaos, something about the old man still felt real. His concern was genuine, and there was a sadness in his eyes that made her hesitate. I don't know what to do," she confessed, her voice trembling. "I don't know who to trust. There's so much going on. I just don't understand any of it." The old man stepped forward slowly, his eyes scanning the alley as though checking for anyone who might be lurking nearby. "I never meant for any of this to happen," he said softly, his voice breaking slightly. "I didn't want you to get caught up in this. You were just trying to help me, but now they know about you. They won't stop." Amara shook her head, trying to make sense of it all. Who are they? What do they want with the key? And why is it so important? The old man looked at her, a long, weary silence stretching between them. "The key opens a vault," he began slowly, choosing his words carefully. "A vault hidden away for centuries. It holds something of unimaginable power, a secret that could change the course of history. But there are people who will do anything to control it. I was part of a group that protected that secret. But when I left, I thought I was leaving it all behind." He sighed, a deep, aching sound that seemed to carry years of regret. "I've spent my life running from them. But the truth is, I can't outrun the past. And now it's too late." Amara felt a flicker of understanding, though she still didn't have all the pieces. You're part of this group? And you think they'll come after me because of the key?" The old man nodded gravely. "They'll come after anyone who has it. The key is the key to everything. If they get it back, they'll be unstoppable." Amara took a deep breath, her hands still trembling from the adrenaline that surged through her. "So what do we do now? How do we stop them?" The old man studied her for a moment, his gaze intense. "There's no stopping them without the vault being opened. The key must be used to find the vault and unlock it. That's the only way to end this. But it's dangerous. There are people out there who will kill to get their hands on it." Amara didn't hesitate. She had no choice. She wasn't going to let herself be dragged into a life of fear, hiding from the shadows. If she was going to survive this, she needed to take control. She needed to finish what the old man had started. "I'll help you," she said firmly. "I'll help you open the vault." The old man seemed taken aback by her determination. For a moment, he simply stared at her, perhaps seeing something he hadn't expected. Then, slowly, he nodded. "You're brave. I didn't think you'd agree." Amara reached into her pocket and pulled out the key, her fingers brushing against its cool, intricate surface. "I don't have a choice anymore," she said. "I'm in this, whether I want to be or not. But I'm not going down without a fight." A faint smile tugged at the corner of the old man's lips, but it was quickly replaced by a look of resolve. "Then we need to move quickly. They'll be looking for us." Together, they slipped out of the alley and into the night, the storm still raging above them, but no longer feeling as threatening. The key was their only hope, and as they disappeared into the darkness, Amara realized something crucial. It wasn't just the key that had the power to change her life, it was her decision to act, to take a stand in the face of fear. That was the true secret to unlocking her future. And no matter what happened, she would face it head on, no longer a passive participant in someone else's story. The next chapter of her life was hers to write.